Hi, so today I'm doing a video on the DX3.90. This is my machine. I've had this since February. Now I've taken the side panels off and lifted the bonnet because it saves a lot of time trying to do this while I'm filming. So I'm going to go over some bits and bobs on this thing and just show you around it so you get an idea of how everything works and where it all is. This has got to be my favourite machine yet for what I do with it. It's very good. It's nice and easy to work on. The parts, they're a little bit tricky to get. You have to spend a bit of time searching, but they are there. The engine is a Deutz, so you can get parts directly from Deutz.com. The pricing for genuine parts, you get what you pay for. You buy the cheaper parts, they'll do the job, but that goes for everything. So I'm going to do this in stages. I'm going to show you the engine, show you the drivetrain, show you the cab and the back end. So we'll start with the engine. So when the panel is on, you still have access to the fuel filter and the oil filter. You've got your lift pump that draws fuel from the tank. That's driven directly by the main high pressure pump. This is permanently oil fed from the engine, which is this feed here. And the earlier ones you would have had to have checked the oil level, drain it, but on this model it feeds through here and drains into the front casing and back down. So this, you don't need to worry about that. That's self-regulating. I've taken the air box lid off this piece just to show you in here. This is your main cooling fan, which forces air through here, forces it through the oil cooler. Admittedly, this one needs another clean again. These you need to keep clean. It's very important that you don't let too much muck get in here. It doesn't take much to clog the fins up on the cylinders and the head. You've also got an oil cooler there for the hydraulics. This was quite bunged up when I bought this, so it's a good idea to blow it out with an airline. I also use a little handheld leaf blower just to blow the dust out and leaves and grass, whatever else it picks up. These pipes, they're also encased in the shroud, so these get cooled by the air being put through here. So this is quite a neat idea. Some air-cooled engines run them on the outside, but Deutz, they run them on the inside. Now, as you can see with this fan, this is a bit grubby. This needs to be kept as clean as you can because obviously dirt on fins, they don't flow so well. Some people suggest when you've cleaned these, paint them a different colour, like yellow, so you can see when they're getting dirty. That's a good idea. I might do that if this is still serviceable once I've taken it off and cleaned it. The other areas inside this engine you want to keep an eye on: rocker covers. These do have a habit of weeping a little bit, so I'm going to have to sort these out, because what happens, you get residue and then muck builds up, especially down in here, and then it clogs up these galleries, so you want to avoid that if you can. So moving along, that's your oil cap for the engine. On the front here you've got your fan belt. Pretty basic setup on this one, there's not too much fancy stuff going on here. This is your cable for your RPM hour meter, alternator, your fan, and that's pretty much it on the front here. The alternator is adjusted by a ladder tensioner. It's got teeth, so you slacken the 13mm here and 13mm on the alternator itself, and then you turn this, I think it's 19mm by the look of it. You turn this and this will push the alternator up to tension the belt. It's a nice way to do it. You don't have to fuss about with crowbars or pulling on it and messing about. It's a good idea. Big battery, it needs it, especially winter time. This has been fitted with LED lights. I'm not sponsored by the company I bought them from or anything. I bought these upright. Up front, I meant. These are from Lightcom. I bought these because I'm not too keen on the style of them. I would have liked a more original look, but they come with an adapter plate, so they fit straight on the original housing. They come with new fittings, there's no messing around. but they give off a good light. It's just the styling. It is what it is. It's growing on me, but they do fit nice. They're straight plug on. There's no modifications needed. That adapter ring fits on various DX models as well. So yeah, it's a nice little bit of kit. So on this side, you've got your wiring harness that goes to your lights. There would have been a windscreen wash bottle. That's long gone. That's disappeared. It also goes to your alternator wiring. It's on a sort of half harness. There's a plug here that goes into the back of here then, so you can remove it without fussing at the back. That's a nice little idea. It does mean it can get corroded in here, so you need to check that. So your airbox, you've got a pretty standard setup. You've got your primary and you've got your inner filter. There is a sensor here to put a light on the dash to say that the filter's getting clogged. Usual dust outlet. Need to keep an eye on that that's not full of muck. The horn, I'll show you the horn there at the top. So the horn is also tied into the temperature sensor on the engine. Now that's over here. This fella here, that's tied in with your horn. This is on number 1. So it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So when this reaches its peak temperature, you'll get a light on the dash. Looks like a thermometer. And it's also tied into your horn, so your horn will go off to tell you that it's getting too hot. Of course, it'll only set the horn off if the horn works. The wiring was already in place for this. This is a gauge probe that's screwed into number 2, and then there's a gauge on the dashboard to give you an idea of what the temperature is doing. I like to have a gauge on there. You don't have to. This will go off and tell you, but at least you've got an idea of what's happening. If it's starting to really creep up, if it's getting really hot, you've got some forewarning that you need to ease off. What else have we got here? Let's have a look. So on this side, inlet exhaust, these Deutz engines, that's predominantly how they're set up. Some models, it won't be a DX3, it'll be a DX4, I think. They've got turbochargers fitted. That's a BF4 series. This is an F4. It's naturally aspirated. It's 4.1 litres approximately. I know it says 82 horsepower. It's not. Realistically, it's more like 75. By the time it hits the PTO, you're looking 60, 65 horse. So you just have to bear in mind when you're looking for attachments, just make sure it's within that power band so that you're not straining the machine too much. Otherwise your implement's not going to work at its best. You've got 2 hydraulic pumps. They're fed through these pipes to the back end. This setup's a bit janky because when I bought this, something a bit strange was going on. These pipes were, you've got the rods for the clutch. They were sort of hitting the rod and it just wasn't very elegant, so I've had to reposition it. It doesn't look very elegant now, but at least things aren't crashing into each other. That's going to get fixed at some point. Obviously got your starter. This is an area you need to be careful of when these engines get very hot, especially at this age. This is 40 years old now. Some of the wiring in here is a bit hard. You need to be careful. I think I'm going to have to possibly redo the wiring on this. At 40 years old, you can imagine the wiring's not the best. And you've also got this point here where it goes up and then goes into those plugs at the back there. This is an area that is a problem on this machine. Water runs off the windscreen down the back of the panel. There is a gland, but this gland has gone plastic and it isn't watertight anymore, so water will have a habit of running down onto these plugs and it does corrode them. So if you're having issues with the electrics on this, you're going to want to look there. It comes through on the other side and then joins up to the rest of the wiring inside the cab. That wiring runs across the dash underneath there, along the side by the door and up into that wing panel. I'll show you that when I go into the cab. There's a lot of issues with these when they get to this age about the brakes not performing as they should. What happens, the seals inside the master, they just sort of crumble up. Genuine ones are very expensive. The cost of 2 aftermarket ones are approximately the price of 1 genuine one. The only issue I have with these aftermarket ones is these units. I've had 2 pairs, only 1 out of the 4 cylinders actually had a working unit. This is like a restrictor, so I imagine what it does is it increases the pressure. One of these, when you applied the brakes, it just locked on permanently. It wouldn't release. There's like a thimble that's supposed to move in here, and it didn't. So what I ended up doing is using the 2 original ones off the original master cylinders, and that solved that problem. But this is an issue with these, so just be mindful. It's not a cheap fix. I think these are, they're about £300 for those 2. Where you're looking at 350, maybe a bit more for one Deutz Fahr one. So it all depends on your budget. If you've got a good budget and you'd rather not faff around, there's a chance you're not going to have any issues. The brake switch is attached to one of these cylinders, and you've got a brake bleed nipple. The only issue I had with this setup is bleeding this side was fine, but when it came to this one, obviously when you screw this back in, you push a little bit of air back into the cylinder, and I had a Samuel Ep1 at one point and had a similar arrangement to this, but that had a T-piece adapter, and the brake sensor was screwed to the side of it with a nipple on top, so you didn't have that risk of pushing air back in. I will be doing something like that with this one, because in future it's a lot easier to do it. I had to use a pressure bleeder and have an assistant press the pedal. It wasn't a 5-minute job, but it's got a good pedal now. Slave cylinders had to be resealed. On these, they don't have adjusters on the drums. Every time you press the pedal, the cylinder bits, they push out every time, so you're always going to have that movement in the pedal. You've got the all-ball unit there for steering. This one's developed a weep. That's not going to be a cheap fix. I'm going to keep an eye on that. There is a hydraulic line underneath here that went recently, so that had to be changed, made a mess. This unit here is your heater. So what it does is it collects the hot air from the engine and feeds it through this trunking into the inside. There is normally a fan, which is in here, but that fan is no longer working, so I will get another one at some point. So how this works, you've just got like a bicycle cable type arrangement here with a spring. This stops this flapping around too much. And what you've got on the inside of the cab is just a little lever. You move this and that adjusts the opening and shutting of that flap, and that works quite well. If you have it slightly ajar like that, you do have a bit more airflow, especially when you don't have a working fan, but it heats the cab up reasonably well as it is. But in winter, I don't think it would be fantastic, if I'm honest. But I haven't had to, I don't use this machine all that much that time of year. This is more of a fair weather machine for me, so it shouldn't be an issue. This is your clutch cable. So the main clutch is operated via cable on this pedal, and it's adjusted via that adjustment there. So you just got to make sure that the free play is correct, otherwise you're going to have issues. In the manual for this, sorry, that's my finger. In the manual it does state what sort of gap you're supposed to have on the pedal. It's not too bad to adjust. These run on shafts. There's 2 shafts that run through into the bell housing. There's a grease nipple on the clutch one, If you can see that one, there's also one further up. That's for the PTO. PTO is on a rod that comes off the lever. So you got grease nipple on that one, and that one, and then there's two on the other side. I'll show you those afterwards. This side you've got your four-wheel drive rod that actuates this one here. That's your drop box, and you've also got your handbrake. There's a rod that attaches to the mechanism on the other side to pull the handbrake on that side. That's the joy of this. This is all rods. It's pretty straightforward. If something's not quite working, it's because something's a bit stiff or jamming against something. This tank comes off really nice and easy. Bear with me. So you've got two straps. This is this strap here. This is the strap at the back. Just hooks at the top. There's a little slot for it. You can't really see it here. Same over there. And then you've got a hex bolt with a nut. You just undo those two. Disconnect these two fuel lines and your wiring for the gauge. Take these two bolts, these 17s, there's two either side of the steps there, and then you can pull this out. And then you've got better access, because at the back there, I don't know if you can really see it there, you've got a drum which is external. So again, this is easily accessible. You can service this. You can actually do it without taking the wheel off. You've got a 19mm bolt. It's quite tight. You undo that, and then it slides off. So the dimple on the outside there, that's the side that the handbrake shoes run on, and the bigger end is where the brake shoes are. It's pretty straightforward setup. There is no adjuster in there, so once the shoes wear right down, your pedal travel is going to be quite a lot. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. These have had new handbrake shoes. The handbrake had been left on while running, because the issue with this is your clutch lever for the PTO. That's your handbrake. But sometimes I see people mistaking this for the handbrake and stating, "Oh, your handbrake's not very good." No, that's your handbrake. So you just be careful of that. It does have a little picture on it, but it's probably worn away now. So there's a few other little bits and bobs and mechanisms under there. Some of these have grease points, some don't. It's just a case of keep them clean, spray some spray grease, just keep them moving freely. There's a little hatch there you can see at the back there. Now in here, if you take this hatch off, again, you can take this off without taking the wheel off. You can unbolt this wing piece here, and what that gives you access to then is the mechanism for the PTO lever, which is in there. With that, then you can unclip it and do whatever it is you need to do in there. So that's quite handy. You will have to be careful of the cabs on these. These are getting old now. They are a little bit rotten. Window seals, door seals, they're all just not fantastic. I don't try to leave this mat in during the winter because, well, it's just going to absorb a lot of water, and I think this is what's knackered the floor in this. This has just acted as a big sponge, and this will hold water for days on end. It is a nightmare to dry it out. So just be careful of that. If you see that, that's more than likely what's happened. And of course you get water leaking past the dashboard because the window seals are not fantastic. But I'll come back to more of that afterwards. So what have we got? On the back end, on the back of these hubs, there's a grease point to grease in here. So you need to do that every couple of 100 hours or so. There's one on each side. Let's give that a few pumps. You'll have grease points. This is the top link sensing unit. You've got grease points here. There's grease points on the lift arms for the adjusters. And they just adjust like so and lock down. There's also, they have a floating position on these top links, so you can pull this clip and pin out, flip this over, and then you've got a floating link if you're in a situation you need that. Same with this side. This has got those quick jaws. I do like these. You just got to be careful with some implements. This sticks out a bit too much and you won't be able to get your implement on, so just be wary of that. You can use Cat 2 balls in this, and you can get versions that have a Cat 2 center or a Cat 1 center, so you can use both of those types of implements. But just be careful, there's different sizes of Cat 2 pins and Cat 1 pins, so I think there's a small and a large one. This is your drop hitch. You've got these jaws that run on that cable. There's a lever inside the cab that actuates that. So when you lift these arms all the way up, it'll take the tension off and these will pull back to release and it can drop down. This jaw's welded on, but it's had some use. It's quite worn. May have to have that looked at some point. There's a reason why this is dropped down, but I'll come to that. You've got adjustable stabilizers. I prefer these to chains. Chains just I don't get on with them. At least with this one, you can adjust it as you want, and you either have it on a floating setting so you've got some travel, or you can lock it in one position and it doesn't move, well, with the exception of slop, it won't move half as much. But that's just my preference. I prefer that setup. This one's got a 6-spline PTO shaft. Everything I run runs 6 splines, so that's fine. Still got the original cover, which is quite neat. The last 2 machines I had didn't have those covers anymore. This mechanism here, you've got a spring. This adjusts how much tension you put on here, so this adjusts your sensitivity. There's a button I'll show you later that controls how the 3-point works. It runs off this piece here, it goes into there. So all of this is all on rods, little boy joints and rods. One of these was a bit bent when I got this, so I've straightened it out as best I can. Same for the 3-point, my apologies, the hydraulics, the spools, they've all got rods that are linked. So when it comes to taking the cab off, you just got to pop those off. This one's got a, albeit homemade, 3-point lever, external one, so you can adjust this while you're outside. Which does make putting implements on a bit easier. So what have we got on this side? Let's have a look. Oh no, actually. Up here is, if this didn't have the auxiliary tank like this one has, that would be your dipstick level for the hydraulic side of this machine, and the 3-point, it all comes off in here. So that's where you check it in there. But because this has got the auxiliary tank, that's your level, and you can fill it in here. And you just unscrew this one as a vent when you're changing the oil. This has got hydraulic brake feed. That runs off the right pedal. There's a little valve on that side, I'll show you that. And then you've got your spools. I don't know which one's a single acting and double acting. I haven't used it yet. Trailer socket, that works. And that's your accessory power, which is external. That's quite neat. Some of them I know you have to run a cable through the cab, but this one's all external, so that's pretty neat. Original Deutz top link. It's missing its lock, but that's fine. This window has been replaced at some point, but the problem that I had with this one is there's 2 different sizes of, there's a steel plate here like a triangle that you can drop down to feed cables in and then shut the window. But I think this one is the larger glass version, and this needs the version that this opening here is a little bit wider. So I'll have to change that. This is taped up at the moment, just up the way they're getting in. I'm missing one of the poles for your lamps. This would have had another one on that side, but it's been removed. I had to fill the hole, but unfortunately the weather's been getting in and it rots out here. So it's unfortunate, but a machine of this age is to be expected. These are plastic wings. These take a bit of a bang. They're quite resilient, but these need cleaning up. They're starting to oxidise and look a bit tatty. So on this side here, we've got hydraulic oil filter. You've got your 2 filler plugs for the gearbox / diff. You've got a lower filler level and you've got a higher filler level. So one is supposed to be if you're working predominantly on inclines or running PTO stationary a lot, and this one is just normal use. Does it make a difference if you use this one more than this one? I don't know. Probably not, but they give you the choice of the 2 heights. That's the other side of those clutch grease points. You've got one there and there's one above it, so you need to do these. I do them every 50 hours. It will push the grease out as you use it. This is your brake solenoid, so when you press the brake pedal, it takes a feed from that slave cylinder there, and it'll actuate that and then send a feed up to your trailer brake unit, and you will hear it. It does strain it a bit when this kicks in. That there is your, I don't know if you can see it there. No, you can't. Let me just, bear with me, I'll crawl in here. So this is the adjuster. You can't see it on the other side because there's too much stuff in the way. This is your adjuster for your handbrake that goes up to a rod, this lever here, and then it travels to the other side and joins the other one. That's how you adjust the handbrake. There's a shaft then with like a leg, and it moves and activates the handbrake shoes. And this is one of your bleed points for your slave cylinder, and then there's a pipe then that feeds down to this unit, and you've got another bleed point there. These flexi units I changed. The part number carries over to an 80s era Unimog, but these are quite large. They're not your standard sort of brake fitting. So I got these from Germany. They were sort of 30 quid for a pair. There's a little breather unit up here. I don't know if you can see that. You can unscrew that. There's just like a wire gauze in there. It was just full of grass, so I cleaned that all out. I know there is a weep on this machine. It's coming from the back here somewhere. It's on my to-do list. You can see how the 3-point lever and then the spool levers are all attached at the top there, and that goes into the cab. And that's the lever then for your diff lock. Sorry, that's what I was trying to show you earlier. So when you press the pedal, it pushes this rod down, and then that kicks your diff lock in. Well, while I'm under here. So this is your 4-wheel drive drop box. It's your drive shaft, front axle. You've got 3 holes in this shield. When this drive shaft's lined up, there's a grease point on each of these holes, so you can grease the UJs on each end, and then you've got the center piece then that you can grease up. It's a bit of a 2-man job because trying to get this to all line up on your own is a bit of a fuss. You can just, there's 4 bolts, you can just unbolt it and take it off that way if you want to. So you've got, when it comes to servicing the gearbox and the differential, you've got to drain the oil, you've got a drain point here on your drop box, you've got one here. And the reason I dropped the drop hitch down here is because it's a bit easier to see it. Right, that there, you really can't see it very well, but there's that nut head there, that's the drain for the diff end. So in these, they're sort of chambered. So if you want to change the oil properly, you've got to drain each of these sections out, and then you've drained it fully. And then when you fill it from these bungs here, it fills all those chambers back up then. You've got your clutch inspection plate there. You'll have to take this plate off, maybe take the drive shaft off, give you a bit more room. But when you take this plate off, you can see up inside here then to see what the fingers are doing on the PTO and the main clutch. That's how you adjust it. Just in that gap there, you can see that's the bung where the heater unit for the sump would screw into. So in the winter months you can preheat the oil, so it's a bit easier to start. You've got your reduction box on the front wheel here. Obviously you have this at 6 o'clock to drain it, and then you have it at 3 o'clock, or you have it at 9 o'clock to fill it. Doesn't take a whole lot of oil. This hub I know has got a leak. The hub seal's gone, so that'll be a job before long. You can see it's making a mess. There's also 2 grease points on the CV. There's one on the other side as well. You've got 2. This is a bit of a bugger to get to. It's a 2-man job to do it, really, to catch it in the right spot. You've got grease point on the top there, and there's one, I don't know if you can see it, there's one there. This is the breather slash filler bung. It's quite a big one, so you can use a funnel, put the oil in here. This takes 80-90. Track rod end, and you got your bump stop here, so you can adjust this depending on what size tyre, what position you put the rim onto. You can slacken these 2 bolts and then use a chisel in that slot there, and then this screws out or in, and it'll change the stop on here then, so you don't catch the bottom of the frame or anything. It's your main steering ram. So just there, that's your level plug for the front axle. So if you have that open when you're filling it, when it drains out of there, you know it's at the right level, as long as the machine's flat, not a slope or anything like this. And that's your drain bung right there, so you want to drain it. On this side then, you've got your grease point here. This is for your swivel bush in here. Keep this greased. Now on some models, they would have had a caliper. There's a disc that goes here. This part of the plate's not here. You'd have a disc and a caliper, and you'd have a valve with that takes the 2 feeds off the foot pedals. When both feeds are activated, then it'll kick this one in. I think it's a 2-pot fixed caliper. The mounting for it's on the other side. You've got the two points for it. This model didn't come with it. I think some of the smaller models that could do 40 kilometers an hour, they had it. You could retrofit it, I suppose. You can get the bits cheap enough. I think the hardest bit to get is the valve. That'd be the hardest bit. That's the breather. Sorry, I didn't mention that earlier. That this thing doesn't breathe that heavily, so it's pretty clean, which is nice for a machine that's done just over 7,000 hours at 40 years old. It's not bad at all. So that's your plaque for the engine. So when you need spares, you give that to Deutz, and they know what engine you've got, and then you can get the right parts for it. That's really handy. So I think overall I've managed to cover most of the bits on this. If I have missed something, please feel free to tell me in the comments. This does move and slide. I'm missing the pins, so it's just, I'm staying as it is for the moment. Most of my, well, I've only got an old roller and it uses this setup, so I haven't really had to use this much. Click that back in there. So I'm going to have a look inside the cab. I can't use this side because Well, the metalwork's a little bit flimsy now, so this side's become ornamental. So we'll go in the other side. While I'm here, the weights are essential on these air-cooled engines. They're a bit light on the front, and so if you don't have weights, your front end gets a bit light. I had that issue with the Sammy I didn't have weights. So it's not a bad size cab, it's reasonably roomy. It's a bit awkward because I'm coming at it from the wrong side. It's better if you come this side. So on the dash, you've got your rev counter and your speed. So depending on what range and gear you're in, gives you an idea of what speed you're doing. I have noticed when I'm going at full speed on the road, it will show about 19 miles an hour, which is about there, so it's not too slow, it goes okay. These are your warning lights. So you've got your indicators, trailer indicators, full beam. That'll come on to say that you've got your glow plugs on. Or glow plug, it's only coming on the second ignition position. You have to hold that on there until the light goes out. It takes about 20 seconds. You've got a hydraulic oil restricted flow light when your filter's getting a bit clogged up. That's your diff lock light that comes on when you press the pedal down, which is that one there. It doesn't work for me for some reason. It's work in progress. That's your engine oil pressure light. You've got your charge status light, that'll come on when you put the ignition on and hopefully extinguish when you turn the engine on. That's your restricted airflow on the air filter warning light when it gets too dusty. That's your handbrake light, that'll come on. That's your handbrake lever there. You pull up, turn to release, and then you pull up, that's your handbrake. And that there is that's your warning light to tell you that your engine's overheating. So when that light comes on, the horn should go on as well, if it works. Hazard light, very similar I think to what the 40-50 series John Deere's use, very similar sort of thing. Fuel gauge, now I have put a new float in the fuel tank. What I find with the aftermarket ones, they do dance around quite a lot when you're moving. The original ones, I think they must have had some sort of dampening setup in them so they didn't bounce around so much. This is your temperature gauge. This is on number 2 cylinder. So most of the time when you're operating with a mower or something, it usually sits about the middle. When the weather's sort of like 20 to 25 degrees, when it's a bit hotter in your 30s, it'll be a bit more up to about here. That seems to be quite normal. If you just let it idle at about 1200 RPM for 3 or 4 minutes, you'll find it will drop back down to about here somewhere. I've never had it go up as high as here, even after 3 or 4 hours of constant use. But again, it all comes down to making sure that airbox is nice and clean so that the fan can cool it down. This has got an air box on top of here. Some didn't have it, some did. These are all adjustable. These are quite a common sight on 80s era machines and probably earlier than that. These are all adjustable. There's a knob here you can turn. That'll open a flap inside. I'm not sure you can see it with my light here. That's it. So you can vary how much airflow comes through. And then you'll have the fan speed switch at the top. Of course that doesn't work at the moment. You've got your brake fluid reservoir. You've got the 2 pipes. They run down through the firewall to each master cylinder. When I got these pipes had really gotten hard and cracked and brittle. So I changed those as well at the same time. Not a pleasant job, because if this pipe is a little bit more swollen than the original pipes, it's a bit of a faff to get it through the bungs in the firewall. Some of these aftermarket brake parts, they specify .3 instead of .4. It's the same with the seals I used in the slave cylinders, so I'm running .3. Here you've got your range. So it goes medium reverse in that same line, and then to your right you've got high and low. So it always goes to the medium and reverse. That's where it always sets to. This isn't synchronized, so you have to be stationary. What you do find sometimes it just does not want to engage, so you just have to let the machine creep ever so slightly and it will just drop in. Don't force it, you'll find you're just hitting a wall. Sometimes you just got to let it creep and it will drop straight in. Gears then, 1 to 4, these are synchronized. So these are no bother, these will change quite nicely, no problem. But this one will crunch if you're not stationary. Would have been a nice rubber boot for the two, but that turned to plastic and exploded, so that had to go. This is your 3-point position lever, so you can adjust that to raise and lower the implements. That's attached to the external one, so that one moves at the same time. This is your draft position sensing control lever. There's 3 positions, so you pull it up and it will change how that behaves, whether it follows the ground or if it tries to keep it at the same position. That's your lever for your quick hitch jaw. You pull the 3-point arms all the way up to the top and pull that, and then release, drop the 3-point arms down, and it'll let the quick hitch drop down then. These are your spools, 1 and 2. Like I said earlier, I'm not sure which one of these is double acting and single. I don't know yet. I will find out at some point. Hand throttle, which is directly linked to your pedal, so it'll move at the same time. I do find if you set it with your foot and then drop it on the lever, it's a bit easier. These are your accessory controls then, so if you've got beacons or you've got other bits and bobs, you'd have switches here for that. You've got screen wash, that doesn't work. You've got your windscreen wiper. I think it's only got 1 speed, it's just on or off. These are your dipped lights, and then that's your work light, which I've got that one there. Again, I got that one from Lycom LED. Does put out a nice bit of light, it's good. In here then you've got your fuses. These are the dreaded bullet fuses. If you get the cheap ones from Amazon, they just melt and fall off. These are Hella ones. These appear to be a better quality. The tips on the top have got more of a sort of sharp point, so they sit better in the holes. Whereas the cheaper ones, they're very flat and they just fall out. And like I said, when they get warm, they sort of shrink and they're rubbish. Don't bother. Spend the money and get the Hella ones. If you can even get old stock original Bakelite ones, even better. But these are pretty good. They've worked so far. There's a couple of relays for your lights and wipers and all that. Well, everything electrically related to like your wipers and lights and stuff like that. It's all in here. Got your fuse chart there. Tells you all the fuse size, what they do, and position. This unit here, you've got 3 screws on the top and you've got 2 on the bottom. This whole unit comes off. There's 4 or 5 plugs from memory. Disconnect them, and this whole unit with its wiring and the fuse holder, it comes off in this piece. And if there's any problems, because obviously you get water that comes in here and it gets fluffy, you can, like that one there, that's needing attention. You can take this off and work it on a workbench rather than in here. You just have to, there's a little bung in here and you pop that off. You've got wiring that comes from a plug in here. It runs to your tail light, one here, and it runs down, goes to your trailer socket, and then it goes into that one to the tail light on that side. There is wiring that goes up these pillars that'll do your speakers and your radio and all that sort of stuff. There's a bit of stuff in here. This is your 4-wheel drive lever. So when you're stationary, pull that up and that's engaged. 4-wheel drive. This is your PTO clutch lever. I did mention this earlier. When you pull it up, it's disengaged. Then you can select what speed you want to run. So if you lift this, turn to the left and drop it down, you hit click. That's 540. Put it back in the middle, that's neutral. To the right there, that's 1000. This piece is supposed to sort of lift and lock into position, but this was C solid, so I had to give it some persuasion to allow it to move, because I couldn't select 1000. I don't use 1000 very much, if at all, but I like it to work. So when this is not in use, you put it to neutral, make sure this lever's down. It's just so that you're not putting strain on the fingers on the PTO pressure plate. It's good practice just to leave it engaged. There was a sticker at one point saying to do that, that's long gone. Clutch pedal, there's a switch, you press it all the way down, that'll allow you to start the engine. Your fiddle brakes. You've got your lever here that you can move to one side, and then you can actuate the pedals. One side, the right side does travel a bit more, and that's because you've got that trailer brake valve, so it will have a bit more travel. But because you've got the equalizer valves on the masters, it'll make the pedals move the same travel when they're joined together. And what you've got up top here, then you've got a glove box. It's a reasonable size, you can put a few bits and bobs in here. I've got my manual, it's for the Deutz Allis version of this. I couldn't find one for the European one, but the Deutz Allis one, I could find that. That's Haynes that do that, I think it was 30 quid. It's just handy to have. Put a new radio into it, and then you've got a clock. I do like having an old school clock in a machine like this, because you can just quickly glance up and gives you an idea of how long you've spent doing what you're doing. I know you can use your phone, but it's just there. The interior light, this is all rotted out. There's a glass bowl that sits in here, and there's a little trigger right there. There's no trigger left, that's gone. So when you open the door, you'll see the light come on, and you can turn it on as you please. And you've got your sun visor, it's only got one position, it comes down to here, and it's okay, does the job. So you've got opening side windows, opens a reasonable amount, but of course all these seals now are old, and you can see it's starting to rot the frame, so it's on my list of things to do. Same on this side, and also back. But as I said, at the moment this is all sealed off just to stop the water coming in. Oh, we'll fix that. The front windscreen opens fully. This one doesn't because the struts are knackered. But you can open it ajar. You've got a position there just to let some air flow through. It's quite neat. This has got this little feature on here. I quite like this. This is quite simple. These are all bent and crooked, so that they're a bit of a faff to do. Not something you can do when you're moving. I wouldn't recommend it. But what this does is it just locks the door in that open position, so when you're moving along you've got a nice little breeze. There's one on that side as well. That one's also a bit bent. The problem I find, it's a nice idea, but the only problem I find with this is when you climb in you tend to get caught on it and you might bend it. This is an old grandma seat. It's knackered, it's had its day. It's not very comfortable. I will be getting a new seat for it. I had to free it all up because it wasn't moving properly. But what you've got at the bottom here then is you've just got a little rotary knob here. You can adjust the tension on it. But yeah, don't run these machines with old knackered seats. It's not comfortable. Get yourself even if it's a cheap one, just get a nice seat that's gonna not destroy your back. And that's pretty much it in here. It's nice and basic. There's not too much going on here. I do like the fact you've got this, because sometimes if you're on a bit of a slope you've got something to hold on to, which is quite handy. For some reason on mine the pins on here work their way out. I don't know if there's supposed to be a little clip. The top one's doing it again. But yeah, overall I really like this machine. It's a nice easy machine to service. It's pretty well thought out. Everything's you know, someone's thought about where everything's placed, how to get access to things. Yeah, I wouldn't shy away from one of these if you come across one at a good price. The key thing, make sure that airbox for the engine is not full of grass and muck, because if it is, leave it alone. Don't touch it, walk away from it, because it's guaranteed it's overheated, it's going to burn oil, it's going to be a mess. So always check that first. Make sure that airbox is nice and clean. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as the fins are not clogged, it's not full of birds' nests and whatever else, then you've got half a chance. And that was the first thing I did when I looked at this machine. I asked to have a look at the airbox, and it was fairly clean. So I thought, okay, this is an okay machine. We'll consider it. The engine, gearbox, and the hydraulics, you can all use 1540 Suto oil. That's what I've done on this one. I've used it throughout. So you can just use the same oil all the way through. The only exception is the axle, that's 8090, and the hub reduction units, they're 8090. But everything else 1540. And this hasn't used a drop of oil in the engine. She hasn't burnt it. Doesn't smoke on overrun. Yeah, so it's just a case of getting a good one. The metalwork lets it down, but mechanically it's good. So, you know, I can live with that. You can touch up the bodywork and tart it up as time goes on, but if the engine or the gearbox or the hydraulics are problematic, it isn't a machine to go into if you're buying one to have as a machine to use at home for pottering around or cutting your field or whatever. It's just going to cost you a fortune, so just be mindful. But I do really like air-cooled engines. They're for a machine that doesn't get a whole lot of use, it's got a lot less to go wrong with it. You haven't got to worry about radiators, you haven't got to worry about core plugs, coolant, water pumps, pipes. It's all very condensed in this unit. I'm just biased, I do like these. They are a little bit noisier than a water-cooled engine, but yeah, I would recommend one. But just make sure in here is nice and clean. I know I've said this a few times now, but make sure this is clean. You will need to get a steel rod, a little flexible one, just so you can poke the grass and muck out of here, just to make sure this has got good airflow. And same through here, just make sure that you can actually see a bit of daylight through those fins, because then you know it's not all full of grass and muck. It doesn't take long. Let me think now, is there anything I've missed? Well, what I will say on this particular one I've got here is these cab mounts are absolutely shot. So at this age, they're going to need new ones. But the floor needs welding, so more than likely a cab will have to come off, so we'll do it then. So just be mindful with these older machines. They will need some attention. But it's all depending on your budget. If you've got a bit more money, you can get a nice smart one. If you've got a bit less money, you'll get one like this. It functions. Cosmetically, it might not be the smartest, but it's just one of those things. Just be careful. The first tractor I bought, I didn't really look into it too deeply, and I bought a basket case. So if you're not sure, get somebody who knows a bit about them, and they can tell you straight away if it's something worth getting or not. And if you get a good one, hopefully you'll get lots of good use out of it. So this one, I got this in February, and I've only done 60 hours with it. I just top the grass and do a few little hobbles with it, but I'm not a farmer or anything. But it's not given me any grief in that time. So a machine like this, for what I use, the implements I have, this is ideal. The only thing I'll mention quickly before I end this video is there is the option to have tombstone weights in here. I can't remember off the top of my head, I think they're 50 kilos. I think you can have up to 2, or was it just the 1? I can't remember. But just to give you some extra ballast, because again they're very light on the front, there'd be one that sits in here. I haven't seen one for sale or seen one mentioned, but apparently that was an option. But yeah, so anything I've missed in this video, please feel free to comment. But hopefully it's been an interesting video. I haven't seen any videos on the internet that goes in depth into these, so yeah, thank you very much.